Hello and welcome. My name is Marc Valdez, and this talk is entitled Walter White on the Turquoise Trail, or Native American History as Recapitulated in Breaking Bad through Filming Location, Mineral Type, and Predominant Color. This is an extended version of the talk I presented at the 36th Annual Popular American Culture Association Conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico on February 12, 2015. I'll be talking about three groups of Native Americans: the Anasazi of Chaco Canyon, the Salinas Pueblos of central New Mexico, and the Navajo of Tehajale. In Season 5, Episode Dead Freight, Lydia points to a radio silent zone where their conspiracy can steal methylamine without being observed. I got very excited when I saw this scene because it seemed to me that she was pointing directly towards Pueblo Pintado, which is an outlier of the Chaco Canyon complex of ruins. And I thought perhaps Breaking Bad is taking a mystical turn. Then I thought again and wondered if maybe there was a spiritual interpretation to what Lydia was doing, pointing so closely to an area of Native American significance. And I wondered, maybe Lydia is supposed to represent Spider-Woman, which struck me with horror because Spider-Woman is known principally as a teacher in Navajo culture, and what does Lydia teach? But then I decided, no, if there's anybody in Breaking Bad who represents Spider-Woman, it's likely Saul Goodman. Quoting from Kelly Carmion regarding Navajo foundational legend, long ago monsters roamed the fifth world and fed upon the Navajo. Seeking to aid their people by killing the monsters, the twins set off on a journey to visit their father, the sun, and request his aid. Spider-Woman helped the twins by teaching them protective prayers and by giving them hoops of feathers. Now, with his specialized prayers of legalese, Saul Goodman helps his twins negotiate their criminal underworld and slay their monsters. There's no railroad where Lydia points, but rather the community of Whitehorse, New Mexico, which is exactly 11 miles across Chakra Mesa from Pueblo Pintado. Coincidentally and interestingly, the actual filming location for Dead Freight is exactly 11 miles from Mount Chalchihuitl, source of the Anasazi's most valuable mineral, turquoise. State Highway 14 has been dubbed the Turquoise Trail on the opposite side of the Sandias, and I wondered if perhaps Whitehorse was a metaphor or analog of the radio silent zone, a place near the Anasazi center of power where a conspiracy could be fostered out of view. More on that in a bit. Walter White makes direct reference to the Turquoise Trail in the episode Ozymandias, making it sound something of a lark. But as the Anasazi could have told them from a millennium before, the Turquoise Trail is a hard and stony path. Turquoise is a mineral metaphor for crystal blue meth. Here is a map of north-central New Mexico. On the right, we have the filming location for Dead Freight, which is on Spur Ranch Road southeast to Santa Fe. Mount Chalchihuitl, exactly 11 miles to the west. To the northwest of the map, we have the community of Whitehorse, and exactly 11 miles from that on the opposite side of Chakra Mesa is Pueblo Pintado. We have Chaco Canyon proper, Pueblo Bonito, La Fajada Butte. Towards the bottom, we have the city of Albuquerque. West of Albuquerque, we have Tehajale. West of there, we have Mount Taylor. Mount Taylor sits on a large uplift known as Cebolleta Mesa, and I'll be talking about the Navajo who lived on the near flank compared to Albuquerque, the near flank of Cebolleta Mesa in the 18th century. East of Albuquerque, we have the New Hampshire filming locations, Walt's Cabin near the crest, the Ponderosa Bar not far from Chilili, and to the southeast of that, we have Las Salinas Playas. I'll be talking about three other locations too. Red Mountain near Chaco Canyon, Cerro Colorado, which is 5 miles north of San Luis, New Mexico in Sandoval County, and Red Mesa, which is not far from San Isidro, New Mexico. In the episode Granite State, Walt flees Albuquerque for snowy New Hampshire. He decides to travel to a New Hampshire bar to make contact with his son. The actual filming location is just within the realm of Las Salinas, the Salt Lakes of central New Mexico. In the 17th century, the Franciscan missionaries set up missions on the far side of the Sandias in the vicinity of Las Salinas Playas. The Salinas Pueblos relied heavily on salt trade. All native groups used salt in the preservation of meat. The arrival of the Franciscans also coincided with the rise of the Apache in the southern plains. The Spaniards began mining salt in large amounts and shipping it to Parral, Chihuahua, to the mines there, and blocking access to the salt by the Apache. This triggered a war which the Spaniards and the Salinas Pueblos allies, they lost. And so the color white, which signifies the episodes in New Hampshire for snow, can signify snow, salt, or the white flag of surrender. Salt is a mineral metaphor for surrender. In the To'Hajiilee scenes, we hear echoes of two great betrayals in Navajo history. In the 18th century, Spanish governor de Anza tried to make the Comanche natives of the plains a vassal nation to the Spanish Empire by employing a policy of gifts that were meant to split the Comanche among their various chiefs. There weren't many divisions among the Comanche, so this policy failed, but there was peace, and so the policy was rated a success, and in turn applied to the Navajo to the west, who had much deeper divisions. So we see the first great betrayal. The Cebolleta area Navajo on the near flank of Mount Taylor broke bad and allied themselves with the Spaniards. Their bitter kinsmen to the northwest began to refer to them as the enemy Navajo, or the Dine Ana'i. And the Spanish, the Mexicans, and later the Americans all benefited from Dine Ana'i help, particularly in Kit Carson's successful scorched earth campaign against the Navajo in 1863 that broke their resistance. Now, at this time, the Americans embraced a very utopian plan, which was to effectively Christianize and civilize all the Navajo by moving all of them and concentrating them at a camp in the Pecos River Valley called Bosque Redondo. So we see the second great betrayal in Navajo history. The Americans asked the Dine Ana'i to go first on what became known as the Long Walk because they were their closest allies. And life at Bosque Redondo was a nightmare for everyone, but particularly for the Dine Ana'i, because they were hemmed in with their Navajo kinsmen with whom they were on bad terms with, and also with mortal enemies like the Mescalero Apache. No one had arms, and so no one could escape since the camp was surrounded by Kiowa and Comanche Indian. And so, and there were inadequate supplies, and so it was a very difficult time. In 1868, the camp was finally dissolved, and the Navajo returned to their lands. The Dine Ana'i split into three separate bands, and the band that settled closest to Mount Taylor, known as the Cañoncito Band, today their descendants are known as To'Hajiilee. The general theme in Breaking Bad of the To'Hajiilee episodes is the burnt orange or red of the classic Colorado Plateau, and the mineral hematite is responsible for that color. Hematite is a mineral metaphor for blood. So we have three native groups, and we also have three minerals, and we have three colors: red, white, and blue, all woven together in the tapestry of Breaking Bad. There are other examples too. There's Gus Fring's favorite Aztec Sacrifice, Walter White, driving in his Aztec. It reminded me what famous author and Volkswagen mechanic John Muir said in his famous manual, a manual of step-by-step procedures for the complete idiot. If we all drove as if we were strapped to the front of our cars like Aztec sacrifices, there would be a lot fewer accidents. But of course, John Muir never met Walter White, who drove more carelessly the more pressure he was under. There's other examples too. There's Echoes of the Conquistadors in Season 4, Episode 10, Salud, the presentation of the tainted tequila to Don Eladio. The tequila is named Zafiro Añejo, which is very appropriate, aged sapphire, because sapphire is among the hardest of all the minerals. At the presentation ceremony, Don Eladio makes a threat that if a single drop is spilled, he would cut off the hand of his help. Don Eladio was hardly the first conquistador to conceive of amputation as punishment. In 1599, Governor Don Juan de Oñate had 1 foot removed from each of 80 Acoma men as punishment for rebellion. And Gus Fring was hardly the first to use poisoning as his tool. The Hopi did so against the hated Franciscans in 1633. The thing I like best about Breaking Bad, and particularly the locations, is how it teaches you to look at various places with fresh eyes, so to speak. For example, a familiar bed and breakfast can be instead, in Breaking Bad terms, the home of a Mexican drug lord. And so I think the example that Breaking Bad sets is to look anew at the New Mexico landscape and look for things that people perhaps hadn't seen before, or could be interpreted in different ways, new ways that might help historical and geographic understanding. I like this idea of Whitehorse as a metaphor for the radio silent zone, and I wondered if it gave any insight into some of the classic problems of southwestern history, such as why did the Anasazi civilization collapse in the 12th century? And so it strikes me that in some ways Chaco Canyon might have been a pre-modern example of a surveillance society, because there's very good visibility at Chaco Canyon. There's very good visibility, particularly at Pueblo Bonito, and a kind of a gradient of visibility as one leaves Chaco Canyon. I also wanted to introduce astronomy, because astronomy was very important to the Anasazi. All Pueblo societies strive to create harmony between the sun and the moon, but the Anasazi went further, and they kept track of lunar standstill cycles. It's also plausible that they kept track of solar eclipse cycles too, because that's the most intimate interaction between the sun and the moon. And so my first inquiry was to inquire a little bit more about the history, astronomical history of Chaco Canyon, and the role of visibility in the society there. Chaco Canyon went into decline around the year